Welcome to the Truth and Leadership Academy. Thanks everybody for coming. So in the past we've been talking about, we've had a theme that we've talked about over the last few months, and that is how we navigate through dependability and then into independence, then interdependence. So dependent, independent, and interdependent. Sometimes accountability can be an intimidating word for people. When they hear accountability, they think of their freedoms being shut down or watched, or they might think of being micromanaged, or they might think of criticism as far as maybe accountability, that type of thing. I want to talk about more of what the real definition of accountability is and try to shine a really bright light on it. First of all, I'll share a quote here by John DeLemme. Accountability separates the wishers in life from the action takers that care enough about their future to account for their daily actions. So there's a difference between wishers and action takers. So this is implying that action takers have accountability in their lives and wishers don't. Anybody wished for something but they've never had anybody help them get to it, so it just stays a wish? And have you ever had a wish that you had accountability for and then it turned into action? It actually takes place because you're accountable to someone for it. I mean, our whole lives are like that, right? Most of the things we accomplish come from having some kind of an accountability in place. In fact, it might be all of it that happens. And so many things that don't take place in your life that you wish would happen doesn't happen because we just simply didn't take that next step to put some kind of accountability in place. Another quote, Joe Dumars, he was a basketball coach as well, and he says, on good teams, coaches hold players accountable. On great teams, players hold players accountable. What's the difference there? What do you think the difference between those two ideas are?
The coach is the only person that's holding the players accountable, but the second part is everybody on the team is holding everybody accountable.
Right. It sounds like a boss versus a culture, right? A boss's job is just to hold everybody accountable in their mind. That's what they think their job is, to make sure that they're holding everybody accountable. But really, the boss's job should be, or the leader's job should be, to create a culture of accountability. Wouldn't that be more effective? Wouldn't you love it if your people are holding each other accountable instead of you having to do that with everybody?
What's a bigger net too? If you're just really responsible to your coach or to your boss, it's just one person. But if you're responsible or accountable to everybody that you work with, there's 5, 6, 10, 20, people.
Right.
That you
Yep.
feel like you're answering to.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what accountability is. So when you think of the word accountability, what's the first thing you think of? Positive, negative? What is it?
I think it's positive. Trustworthy. Somebody that you know you can hold accountable, you trust to do what they're supposed to do.
What would be the definition, though, of accountability? If you had to apply a Webster's / mix of your definition, what would it be? Is it the same as responsibility? It's slightly different, isn't it? It encompasses responsibility. What's responsibility?
You're taking ownership of something with the accountability.
You are taking it upon yourself to make sure that there's a certain result, right? Accountability would be including someone else into that. Like maybe it's your boss, finding out what your boss expects of you. Maybe you're making yourself accountable to your, or maybe it's in your family. You make yourself accountable to the other people in your family, or so you're submitting to something. If you're accountable, there's something that holds you accountable that you have to submit yourself under, right? What would be examples in our business of what would be something you'd have to put yourself under in order to be accountable?
Being on time to work. Being prepared for a rush.
Taking steps, doing things the right way. You put yourself under another person. Or if you're a general manager, you also want to be accountable to your crew, though, too, right? You're accountable to your crew. You want to give your crew permission to hold you accountable if you're not doing something right. That's that's the proper way to do it. You should be accountable to most everyone for the most part, in some ways. So, accountability is different than authority, though, right? But people misunderstand that sometimes. Sometimes when they think that I'm accountable to somebody, that means I'm under their authority and they're going to abuse me. Because maybe that's what they're used to. That's what they got when they were younger, or they're in their last job or whatever. But accountability doesn't mean that. Accountability just means that you're looking for someone else to help you achieve what is expected of you, pretty much in any area of life. So accountability, just the fact that sometimes people are accountable and sometimes people are not accountable. Sometimes people just really don't want to be accountable to anyone, right? And oftentimes people do want to be accountable to everyone. Well, first of all, being accountable to someone is not really natural. Most people don't really want to do that too much. Most people have a freer spirit than that. They'd rather call their own shots. They don't want someone else telling them what they can and can't do. That's what's natural, of course. And so if you're partaking in accountability, there is a choice involved. You always have a choice whether you're going to be accountable or not, right? As you're driving down the street, you have a choice of whether you speed or whether you don't speed. That is a freedom you have. You have a freedom of choice. You can speed. You can drive as fast as you want, or as fast as your car will go, or you can choose not to, and to put yourself under the accountability of the law. Right? So you make that. You always have a choice. So freedom of choice is really important. It's at the baseline of this whole idea of accountability. And so you got to understand this before we can go on. So freedom of choice. So everyone has freedom of choice. We all have that. Even when you hear people say, well, I didn't have a choice. No, you always have a choice. Now, maybe the other option is a really horrible option, so it's easy to make that choice. But you always have a choice, right? Everyone has differing abilities to make wise choices. Anybody have like an older kid and then a younger kid? Who makes the wiser choices? I mean, I guess it could be the younger kid. Right? Or maybe you look back and you think of some of the choices you made in high school or middle school or something. Everybody makes some really stupid mistakes, really stupid choices. We all did, right? And that's because of our ability to make choices, to discern things and to think things through and to do it. It's everybody's different. And even doesn't even matter how old you are, it's just everybody in this room has different levels of ability to make choices. And that's just the way it is. It's just a different level that everybody's at. Everyone is fully responsible for their choices. This is a tough one because some people have a hard time swallowing that. So many people would just rather have it not be their responsibility for their choice. They'd rather have it be somebody outside of them be responsible for their choice. You didn't give me a choice. You put me in this situation. You caused this. I'm just reacting because this is the only thing I could have done, and it's your fault, you know. And but we have to realize we're fully responsible for all of our choices. And then accountability is one of those choices. Whether you make yourself accountable to the people in your world, in your life, in your workplace, is a choice that we make or we don't make. Where does our freedom end? Okay, so we all have freedom of choice, right? We all can do what we want. We can speed if we want to, or we can follow the law if we want to. We can say whatever's on our mind if we want to, or we can be mindful of the other people and maybe control what we say a little bit better. We can swear or we can speak professionally, you know, all of these things. We can be mean or we can control ourselves. These are all part of our freedoms. But when does our freedom end? That's an interesting question. When does our freedom end? And we know it does because we have jails, right? So think about this. So one way that our freedom comes to an end is when we overstep our boundaries and someone takes it from us. So, you know, you take it upon your freedom to take a gun into a bank and decide to help yourself to the money because you're not accountable to anybody. You're not accountable to the law at that moment because you decided that the law is not going to control me in this moment. I'm going to go take what I want and not be accountable to anybody. Well, what happens? You lose your freedom. Because whether you think you're accountable or not, you still are. The police aren't going to say, well, he doesn't want to follow the law, so it doesn't apply to him. No, you get arrested, you lose your freedom, right? But isn't that a principle that applies everywhere? You go to any job, you slack off, you lose your job, right? DHS. You know, I'm dealing right now with a foster mother that's really dropped the ball in the past, and she's dealing with some consequences that were from her previous attempts to skirt accountability. So now she's suffering some of that. You see it all around where your freedoms, people's freedoms are being taken away from them. Or when someone else abuses their authority. So your freedom could be taken away, at least temporarily, hopefully not for long, but your freedom could be taken away if somebody takes you at gunpoint and puts you in their van and drives away with you. Your freedom's being taken away because of somebody else. Or maybe on the job, your boss is demanding and demands that you do something, whether it's completely against your moral ethics or what your job description is or whatever, and they're just forcing you to do it. And your choices are limited. You still have a choice, but they've put you in a position where there's no good answers. So your freedom's been taken away at that point. And so that's another one. Hopefully none of us are really dealing with that a whole lot, or when we self-destruct from abusing our freedoms. Ever seen a college kid after they've moved out of the home and gone to college and just go crazy? They drink and they start smoking and they're doing all kinds of wild things. They're like, finally, I have no authority. My parents are out of the picture. I can do anything I want. I'm not accountable to anyone. And then they just indulge. They just go crazy on this freedom. And then, of course, it leads to slavery, right? It leads to addictions. It leads to poverty. It leads to alienation of friends. It leads to all kinds of really bad things when we indulge in our freedoms, right? Worst thing that can happen to any person is you get everything you want, by far, because we are our worst enemies. So anyway, that's another way that freedom can be taken away. And then the last way, and this is a healthy way that our freedom can come to an end, is that when we dedicate ourselves and voluntarily surrender it for a greater cause. So we voluntarily say, you know what? Whatever you'll have me do, I'm going to do that because I believe in what you're doing. What would be some examples in our society of people like that? How about our people in the military? These are people that have given up their freedoms in order to submit to something that they highly believe in, right? Now, the freedoms that they give up is basically once you're in the military, they own you for a while, right? To some degree. If it's time to go to war, you go to war. You don't have the freedom to not do that, but you've made that decision up front to dedicate yourself voluntarily to be part of something. And really, any job that you get involved with, you have the same choices. You can either be accountable to it and just get after it and believe in it and buy into it, or you can just go into it and resist accountability and do your own thing. You see the difference, how they play out? You can see a big difference on how they all play out. Now, what I want to do is I want to take a minute here, and I want to talk about how awesome accountability is and what it can do for someone's life. All right? Because it's really easy to think through accountability as being a restraining force. But I want to talk about accountability as an enabling force. It's something that launches you into a better place, right? And so with accountability, when you put yourself under influence, where you're accountable to them, things can happen, okay? Accountability, when it raises, when you make yourself more accountable, okay, it increases trust. So the person that you're accountable to, as you make yourself more accountable, it increases trust. What if one of your closers it really takes this serious and they want to be accountable for their closes? So they're asking you, like, how am I doing? What can I do better? Is there something, so they're really wanting to do what you are expecting of them. And they do this 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. All of a sudden, 3 months down the road, they've got a consistent track record of being accountable for their actions and being accountable for their closes, being really good and just having good, solid customer service and so on in their shift. They just raised your trust. Now you're okay with it. You're like, I love having this person because I know I can count on them. I know that they're accountable to me. They know that they're accountable to me, and they choose that. And now I trust them for the future going forward because they've already proven that they can be accountable. Maybe there was times in there that you've had to come to them and say, hey, just so you know, you missed this, or I could really use you getting this. And they're like, hey, no problem. And then they make the change because they're accountable. And so trust increases. So as accountability increases, trust increases, and then empowerment increases too, right? How does empowerment apply to this? You trust somebody, so then you give them more to do. You teach them, you give them more responsibility. You help them to move to that next level of that next thing that they could do, because they've proven themselves to be accountable prior to that. And so they built up the trust. Now they're being empowered, so they're giving more freedom. They're able to make more choices, and they're able to do more and just have more freedom and power of what they're doing. And then as that increases as well, then opportunity increases. Okay, and so you can see the little arrow going up, and this is where it launches. I mean, it doesn't just stay going like this. Opportunities can pop up this way. So by being accountable, it can give you lots of credibility, right? And when you have credibility, that's where the trust increases, the empowerment increases, and the opportunity increases. Now, on the flip side, though, what if you don't? What if you have people that don't put themselves, that aren't very accountable? Anybody have any employees like that? You tell them, and they just do their own thing. That's not being accountable, right? Their guideline for what is expected of them is set by them, or maybe the people around them. If you've got a culture that's not doing well, right? So they're holding themselves to the lowest level of accountability that they can. So if their teammates don't expect them to weigh and measure, then they're okay with it too. They're setting the expectation, so I'm accountable to them. I just need to do as well as they do. So you're knocking down your accountability. Your accountability is low, and then because of that, your trust goes down too. Then the people that you work for can't trust you because you consistently lower your standards. You're not accountable. Maybe you try to correct the issue and they just blow it off because they're not accountable. Trust goes down. Empowerment goes down. Now, maybe they don't receive any more empowerment. Maybe they get less. Maybe you take some things away from them. We've seen that before too. So your opportunities in your life can grow, or your opportunities can be shrunken down depending on your accountability and how it works. So this is an important flow chart here to understand, because accountability is at the beginning part of this. It's the whole beginning. So I've told the story before about, I don't know if I've done it in this Truth in Leadership Academy, but if I were to leave my position, my job, and whatever, and start over, just as an experiment, just completely start over in a minimum wage job, this is how I would do it. So let's just say I would go to McDonald's. I would just go in, kind of wear some grungy clothes, go to McDonald's and say, hey, I want a job. Can you make me your fry guy? And I would imagine I'd probably get hired as a fry guy at McDonald's. And I would not put any qualifications on there. I would just go as just a guy, right? Just starting off. And so with no credibility, just clean slate, nobody knows anything about my abilities. And I started as the fry guy. Well, here's what I would do. That 19-year-old crew leader at McDonald's, I would put myself under their authority, and I would be the best fry guy that they've ever seen. Anything that they would say, I would say, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, I'll do it for you. And it doesn't matter that I might have a little bit more knowledge about the restaurant industry than them. I would still submit myself. And it wouldn't be long, and they'd say, wow, that guy's good at fries. He's like salting exactly like I showed him. He's not even wavering. Nobody does that. Everybody does their own thing. But this guy is doing this. And most people in our industry, most younger people will take shortcuts here and there and all that. But me, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't take any shortcuts. I would do it just like they asked me. And it wouldn't be long at all, and they'd be saying, hey, we got to move this guy onto making sandwiches or whatever, right? And then so for me, I would put myself under that assistant manager's tutelage or whatever, and I would be the best sandwich maker that they've ever seen. And I would just do it. Even if I had great ideas of maybe how you could do it better, I would just squash that and I'd say, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then it wouldn't be long, and they would realize that, wow, this guy's a good sandwich maker, right? You should be like the night supervisor and close at night. or put me on register. Maybe that's the next thing. And I would just follow and do things exactly the way even if I know better ways. And I would just do that, and I would gain credibility, right? I would put myself under the authority, and I would be moving up quicker than most people would ever move up, right? And then I'd become a shift leader or a shift supervisor. I'd do the same thing. I'd just do everything that general manager wants of me, and I would be focused on making sure that general manager's job, that I make their job as easy as I can possibly as I can possibly do, and they would not have anything to worry about when it's my shift. The store would be great. I would treat people great. I would just be what they need me to be, because I would submit myself to that authority, and I would just consider that person's authority unconditionally what I need to submit myself to. Has nothing to do with skill or ability, right? This has everything to do with attitude. And then how long do you think, if I just kept doing that, how long would it take before I became a store manager? Probably not long, right? Even if you take out maybe some of the skills that I've developed, over the years, even if you take that out, and I was slower than normal or whatever, I would still work my way up, just because I would be accountable, and people are looking for accountable people. And I would do that. And then how long would it be before I was an area supervisor and then a district, whatever. There's no end to it when you approach it this way. See, going back to this right here, because I was accountable, they would learn to trust me. And then they would give me more things to do through empowerment. And then it would create more opportunity, the next position and the next position, the next position. But think about how many people will go down this road, they're starting to go up, and then for whatever reason, they'll just kind of change and go back and go the other way. I want to be less accountable now. And so I'm kind of tired of being accountable. Somebody be less accountable now. And they think that their progress going up should stay that way. Well, it doesn't work like that. You stop progressing and you start backing up. You start going down. That's the way it is. But accountability is so much of that. When we decide that we don't have to be accountable to whoever we're working with or working for, the slide goes downhill. I'm not suggesting anybody could go in and do that. That's not what I mean. Some people are meant for that kind of business, some people aren't. But I will say that the majority of people that could be a general manager at McDonald's aren't, because they're not accountable. Only the smaller number of people that have the skills and decide to be accountable actually make it there.
I've witnessed people that were technically under me in other jobs, and I remember looking at them wondering why they weren't above me because of how well they did. And so when I worked at Wendy's, we had just a shift supervisor. Her name was Ashley, and man, this girl was fantastic. She just, anything you asked, she did it. She did it well. She did 120%. And she even did better than the co-manager, I felt like, and she was even doing some of the store manager's job very well. And I just remember wondering why she was only a shift lead. Well, I moved away, and she now has her own Wendy's store. So somebody obviously noticed the same thing after I left. Yep. And one of the attributes that she has probably is accountability, right? Oh, yeah.
Just decide, hey, I'm going to be accountable. Yeah.
She helped train me even better on my job, even though she was just a shift lead and I was an assistant manager. I remember going to her for a lot of problems because she had the answers. So I was even getting my training from somebody who was technically lower than me because of her accountability.
Right. So if you look at these three stages again, the dependent stage, the independent, and then the interdependent. On the dependent stage, you need somebody else to depend on. You can't necessarily depend on yourself. And other people can't necessarily depend on you. Okay, so that's one out of those three of the check boxes that get checked. You move into the independent stage. You can meet your own needs, so you can be your own source. You can obviously be dependent on other people as well, so you can solve your own problems. You're also capable of having someone else solve your problems, because in your last stage, in the dependent stage, that's what you did, right? But in the independent stage, it doesn't mean that the other people can necessarily depend on you. You can depend on others, you can depend on yourself, but they can't necessarily depend on you. And so when you move into that third stage, interdependence, that's when you can depend on others, you can also depend on yourself, and others can also depend on you. And this is where accountability comes in, because you can't do that if you're not accountable to each other. You can't have an interdependent system if you're not accountable to anybody or to everybody else. everybody in that system has to be accountable to each other, right? That's where we go back to the quote where a great team will have a coach that holds people accountable. A great team holds each other accountable. And that's where you move into that system of interdependence. And accountability is a main part of that. So what would be some areas, I've got several to share, but what would be some areas you guys can think of in your jobs that require accountability, that for you guys to be accountable to someone, whether it be ownership or Papa Murphy's or Northern Lights, the corporate, whatever it might be. What would be areas that you guys would be accountable?
The red book, we're accountable for pretty much everything that goes on.
Yep.
I'd say every person that's running a shift at Papa Murphy's is accountable for using the red book.
Yep.
Should be.
Yeah. How about cash?
Staff.
Cash procedures. Yep. Staffing. There's all kinds of things. There's accountability. There's
Forecasting.
duties that need to be done. There's protocol. All kinds of things that we have to be accountable for. Why do you suppose less than a full, the full number of people are actually accountable?
I think the culture, like what you were talking about, you have to get the whole store involved in order for everybody to actually be accountable. Following up, I don't think we follow up enough. I think we just let things go too much. So that's and communication.
Getting them to buy into it, into you.
Yep.
I would say some people have bad experiences with other people in leadership that they can still trust or even perform at their full capability, maybe because they're
Yep.
just trying to watch and see how things go.
Well, and if somebody does have trust issues like you're talking about, maybe they counted on their parents or their previous employers or whatever, and they let them down and they found them not to be trustworthy. And here you come into a workplace, and the truth is that people that don't trust really aren't trustworthy, right? Because you think that everyone is like you. Like if you're a thief, you think everybody steals. If you're compassionate, you think everybody else is compassionate. If you're honest, you think everybody else is honest. If you're skeptical, you think everyone else is skeptical. That's the law of reflection. And so if you don't trust, you think no one else trusts either. So if you have a hard time trusting other people, you don't think other people trust you, and that affects your work. Why should I work hard if they don't trust me? Well, maybe they do trust you, or maybe they're trying, but you're making it impossible because you don't trust them first. Make sense? That's one of the dynamics. So it's a good thought. So in our workplace, I'll just give you some examples of how accountability and putting yourself in a place of accountability really sharpens everything and gives you more opportunities. And that is like with my managers, I have a different, over the years, I've just had a different variety of managers that have grabbed a hold of accountability better than others. I've had managers that were quick to hide where they've been in their stores. We were just talking about this today a little bit. Maybe they like the freedom of being able to slip out and do whatever they want, or leave early and come in late, and they would just prefer that they're not accountable for that. They can just kind of make their own choices, do their own thing, and work less hours, and hopefully no one will know. That's the lack of accountability. And then I've had people on the other side of it too that go out of their way to make sure that I know that they're going to be taken off a little bit early, and the reason why. And those are the people I just don't worry about, because I know that they're accountable. They know the importance of just letting somebody know, or being above reproach, just not living in the darkness but living in the light, where what you do can be seen by everyone, and so that holds you accountable, right? If you're in the dark and no one's looking, there's a lot of shady things that happen in the night when no one's looking. And people that want to avoid accountability, they'd rather stay in that. They'd rather stay in their closet and hide all their demons and not let anybody see what's going on. But somebody that wants to stand in the light and say, hey, look, I'm fully accountable. Ask me anything, I'll tell you. I won't make excuses. I'll own up to it, and I'll do my best to fix it. and keep it coming. Keep letting me know if there's anything more I can do. I have managers that will shoot me texts or whatever and just let me know, hey, just so you know, and then tell me something that they could have easily gotten away with not telling me. Maybe it's a store a long ways away and there's no way I would know that they left 2 hours early, but they tell me anyway. Now, are they really asking for permission? No, they know that I'm fine with it. They just need to, they want to be in the light. They want to be in the light. They want to be accountable because they know that that's where the trust comes out. They know I'll trust them if they do that, right? But other people don't care about the trust, so they'd rather just stay in the dark, and they don't care if you know what's going on. People that have all of the abilities in the world to just get the job done and do it really well and just soar, but they just don't want to be held accountable. And they just limit themselves. They keep themselves on a flat place, and they don't go anywhere because they just don't want somebody to tell them what to do, or they don't want to have to submit to an idea that in their mind they think is inferior to theirs. Anybody followed a rule that they thought was bogus, but you followed it anyway? Sometimes that's the best way to go, right? You're like, you know what? There's 10 ways to skin a cat, and I'm going to skin it this way. And maybe the most important thing is that it gets skinned. Not. Why am I using that example? That's really sad. All right.
Oh, gosh.
To make a pizza, we use that. We're not skinning cats.
Skin cat.
You're all like, what? This guy's twisted. Yeah. Well, I know. I've skinned a cat 10 different ways. So, no. This is going south. Sorry. And so, see, what I did is I violated the thing, the accountability. I should be more accountable to saying appropriate things, but I was going to say whatever I want, so I'm losing your trust, and right? And it's just the opportunity next time is going to be, we're not going to listen to Jolie. That's right. Give me the benefit of the doubt, if nothing else. So anyway, so what does it look like? So I just want to look at this from a practical perspective. What does accountability look like? So an accountable person is accountable to the truth, okay? They are honest. So accountable people are honest. The truth is important, right? Because if somebody's going to hold you accountable, they might have to ask you about something. Accountable people aren't going to try to run away and hide in the dark. They're just going to say, yeah, okay, that's true. It's my bad, Then they're gonna adhere to the truth. An unaccountable person will change the truth to match their needs. What? I didn't do that. It wasn't me. That's an unaccountable person, a person that makes a mistake but won't own up to it. That's just not being accountable. Anybody met anybody like that before? Right? Anybody spoken to less than 5 people like that today? Right? So, and we're all like that at times. And the thing is sometimes we're really accountable in some areas of our lives, but not as so accountable in other areas. And sometimes we need more accountability in areas. See, there's some areas of my life I really need no accountability for. Nobody needs to teach me or hold me accountable to read or study stuff. But I have to hire a person once a week to help me with my physical shape because I need accountability. Because if I don't have somebody breathing down my neck, reminding me what I need to do and pushing me, I'll just exercise my freedoms and not do it. And it's really been helpful for me. There's other areas of my life I just need a lot of accountability with too. Business, I need a lot of accountability and personal character and things like that. So an accountable person cares about how their behavior affects others and the team. Okay, so sometimes that's a form of accountability. Is what other people are experiencing around me matters to me. So I don't want to be the guy that makes the job harder for everyone around me. I want to be the guy that makes the job easier for everybody around me. So that's my standard that I adhere to, and that holds me accountable. Because that's the guardrail. When I start harming other people or stepping on other people's toes, that's the yellow flag or the red flag that makes me say, wait, stop. I can't do this. I'm causing more harm than good. Other people that are not accountable, they'll just trample over somebody and they won't think twice about it. Ever seen that?
You're also describing this between a servant leader and a top-down leader, too.
Yeah, no doubt. So an unaccountable person is more interested in their own outcome rather than others. Some people will trample right over other people in order to get what they need. and they're not putting themselves under or considering the other person's needs more than themselves. So the golden rule can be a great way to be accountable. I'm accountable because other people are just as important as me. What they need and what they want is just as important as what I need and what I want. So I need to treat them as an equal and not as someone less than me. So that's a form of accountability as well. An accountable person holds themselves more accountable than they do others. Okay? That sounds kind of weird, but it's true. Somebody that's really accountable will make sure that they're meeting the expectations that's on them, but they might be a little graceful for other people in some areas. That can get dysfunctional if it goes too far, but an accountable person is more accountable for themselves, typically. An unaccountable person holds others accountable more than themselves. Now that's more like it, right? That's what most people do. I'm going to hold you more. I'm going to hold you accountable to doing the right thing, but if I do that same thing, I want some grace. But I'm going to hold you accountable, right? Anybody? So here's a question. I think I've asked this before, but if you're driving down the interstate and a car passes you, is it because you're driving too slow or because they're driving too fast?
Yes.
No, I mean, what's in your head? You're like, sometimes you look at them like, wow, you're speeding. You're just, you judge them for driving too fast because, of course, with the speed that you're driving, that's just right. Right? But if you're driving down the interstate and you drive past a car that's going slow, you might be thinking, gosh, man, you're just driving way too slow.
I just do the opposite. So when I'm like going the speed limit, somebody goes past me, I'm like, okay.
Okay, but do you...
But if I go, like, if I'm the one that's going faster and somebody's slow, I get upset.
Right. Because your own point of reference seems more right than you. So, but if you're accountable, if you're fully accountable, you're not going to have that bias the same way, So, an unaccountable person will hold others accountable more than themselves. So that's pretty common. An accountable person invites other people's perspectives about them and their behaviors. An accountable person will say, hey, I'd like to get your input. How am I doing? When it comes to maybe evaluations in the workplace, an accountable person wants to know, hey, can you help me? Can you tell me what I need to work on? Can you help me know where I'm at and where I need to get to? A person that's not accountable, they dread evaluations. They don't want to know because they look at it as criticism, right? Because they're not accountable. They don't want that. They don't want to be held accountable to anybody. They would rather tell you how well they're doing. Ever had that before where a person tells you how much they should be making and they're really underperforming, but they tell you a high number, like I'm worth $13 an hour. You're looking at them, you think, nobody here thinks you're worth $11 an hour.
Happening 5.
An unaccountable person is less interested in other people's perspective about them. They are often easily offended. So they don't want to know how they can improve. And if you help them, if you say, hey, I need to share something with you, an area of concern, they're quick to get offended because that's just not what they're just not interested in being accountable. They're just not interested in that. They would rather just be free. Let me be free. Let me do what I want. Let me fail how I want, and don't hold me accountable to how much I hurt other people.
And give you the prize.
Yeah.
I've had conversations with people lately about them having a problem, but any solution that you offer them isn't how they want it to go. So they don't really want a solution to the problem. They just want.
They want their solution to the problem, not anybody else's.
Right.
Yeah.
They just want it fortified that it's okay.
Right. I don't really want to solve the problem, but I want you to pay me more so that I can stay. I want you to solve the problem. You're my boss. You're supposed to solve my problem. When you have a person that's entitled, and really entitlement is, it is a form of lack of accountability, because entitlement is I decide what I'm worth. Accountability is like, can you help me understand what I'm worth? What am I worth to you? Instead, they'd like to tell you how much you're worth to them or they're worth to you. So an accountable person respects authority and systems. They are rule followers because they understand the necessity for rules or systems or procedures. They understand that, and they understand what that leads to, how that leads to success. An unaccountable person loves independence and power. They make their own rules. But that's an unaccountable person. And we see that a lot. And of course, just like the diagram that I showed, they'll run out of opportunities quickly, right? An accountable person is humble and caring of others. Again, just that whole golden rule thing makes a lot of sense. An unaccountable person can be prideful and may disregard other people's feelings because they're not accountable to that. They're not expected to not hurt other people's feelings.
Feelings are your problem, buddy.
Yeah. And you've seen a lot of people. I've seen a lot of managers. I've seen a lot of managers that are people pleasers. They want to make sure that everybody's feelings are met, are understood and met, and that's not always healthy either. And then you got other people like, hey man, you're not paying me to be their boss or to be their friend. It's like, well, that's not always healthy either. But there's got to be a healthy boundary of accountability. So the accountability in that case would be you're accountable to be a leader to them, not their friend and not their boss, but a leader, right? This is a big one. An accountable person values responsibility over freedom. Think about that. Think about an accountable person says, well, you know what? Somebody's got to do this. So it might as well be me. I'm gonna have to stick around and do this because other people aren't doing it. Where other people are like, well, I don't know who's going to do it, but I'm not going to do it because I'm off. I'm done. I'm off for today. I'm going to leave. I don't know who's going to do it. So they're exercising their freedom. Hey, I'm scheduled off, so my freedom to be able to go is more important than the responsibility, taking up the responsibility to fill the slack, that kind of thing.
I'll tell myself on Saturday I did not want to stay later than I did, but I still stayed, and I probably had an attitude about it.
Yeah, and of course, nobody's perfect. Especially when you get surprised by things like that, it's like. But if you're accountable, it's not nearly as bad. When you're an accountable person and you get stuck with something, you just roll up your sleeves and you just get after it. If you're not an accountable person, you just blame everybody else for this crappy position that they put you in, and you go off and you do your own thing and you don't become responsible. But then you feel guilty and you're still pointing fingers, and now everybody's going to blame you because you didn't. Because you're exercising your freedom, you're not being accountable. Accountability is a wonderful thing because it sets you free, right? The lack of accountability convicts you. The lack of accountability when you indulge in that freedom to not be responsible, it's a dark hole. There's no good ending to it ever. But yet that's what's more natural to us. An accountable person is responsible for the outcomes, not just the effort. Rose, you got that?
What?
Yeah.
I wasn't listening.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
An accountable. I'm holding her accountable. You understand?
And she's pointing her finger at Mac.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Yeah. An accountable person is responsible for the outcomes, not just the efforts. Anybody heard anybody justify failure with their efforts? Well, I did the best I could. Don't you hate that? I did the best I could. It's like, so what does that mean? That you actually did succeed just because you did the best you could? Don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean we're supposed to be ultra critical of people when they give good efforts. That's not what I mean. But somebody that's accountable won't ever say that. Won't say, oh, I did the best I could. Somebody that's accountable say, you know what? I think I've got some ideas now how I can do better next time. Or please help me know what I could have done differently, and then next time I'll just be a little bit better. Because they're accountable for it. They don't need to make excuses. They don't need other people to think that it wasn't their fault. They don't need, they just want to know how they did and how they can do better next time. That's an accountable person. But some people need to know that what they did was acceptable, even if they didn't win. Or at least I did better than that person. They want everyone to believe that that the best they could is all they could do, and they're successful, even at a lower level of success. Make sense? That's crazy, though.
Some people want to pay the bill with that excuse.
Yeah.
They have no intention of getting the job done. They just spend the day thinking of what an excuse they can give.
Yeah, that's right. And so, an unaccountable person justifies himself by his efforts rather than his outcomes. And maybe it's true that they put forth a lot of efforts, but putting forth all the effort isn't the goal. The goal is to be great at whatever you're doing. And some of these things are really, really important. Maybe it's a marriage. You don't just fail in your marriage and say, yeah, but I tried really hard. You want to succeed, and you want to do everything you can to succeed, and you don't make excuses for lesser accomplishments. Effort is not not a reason to be content with calling that, stamping that as success. Sometimes we just need to look at the results, because we are in a results-driven world. Think about a surgeon, loses a patient. Yeah, but I tried. I did my best. No, that surgeon is going to figure out what went wrong, how they could do it differently. They're not going to be unaccountable. Surgeons are accountable. I mean, I don't know what happens in hospitals. But I would imagine that there's a lot of protocol for different things that they have to be examined to see whether procedure was followed properly, and then there's a lot of accountability in that industry. And so you're in the medical industry, aren't you?
Mental health.
Oh, mental health. Okay, but I'll bet there's a lot of but there's a lot of regulations and a lot of things. Yeah. But think about the airline industry, right? Would you want those mechanics that check out the planes in between flights? Would you want them to be highly accountable, or would you like some loosey-goosey expectations put on them? Today, I'm a fairly detail-oriented person. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have necessarily known that, because I worked really hard on details to get details right and to be a detail-oriented person. But I was in a bus ministry years ago at my church. I was in youth ministry, and there were a few guys that drove the bus. We had 2 big buses, and I felt bad that the same couple guys were always driving the bus, so I thought, well, maybe I should get my CDL license and contribute to this as well. So we had this, what we called the bus Nazi, and he was the bus commissioner, and he was really strict. And the inspections, the pre-inspections for buses were so anal retentive, and this guy was so over the top. But everybody knew that our buses were going to be well maintained, really well maintained, and so everybody went along with it because they knew that this guy's really good at what he does. But I couldn't stand it. I did it for a year, and I had to go to him and say, "Look, dude, this is way too much for me. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be held accountable for this busing. I want to be held accountable for other things." And so I ended up not doing driving a bus for more than a couple years, because just that accountability was so intense. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying right or wrong whether I should be driving a bus, but the thing is our church had an excellent reputation for the safety of bus driving, because we had a person that was high in accountability in that position. And he drove some people nuts, some people that didn't want to be held accountable. And I think that was probably it. At the heart of it, I didn't want to be held accountable to the level that this guy wanted me to. I wanted to be held accountable at a lower level.
Joel level. At a Joel level.
At a Joel level, yeah. That's where I want to... That's a good... That's what we all want, right? We all want to be held accountable to our level, not a higher level. Unless we're accountable, then we want to get what being accountable gets you, right? And that's where success comes in. Success only happens when you find out how things work, and then you do those things according to the general principles that get you there, right? The Wright brothers didn't create the first airplane by violating natural principles. No, they had to find out what those natural principles are and then agree to them, and they had to follow them, obeying those principles. And then it finally happened. It's the same thing. Principles hold us accountable in all of these areas. So anyway, so how do we make ourselves accountable in the workplace? Let's take just a couple minutes real quick. How do we make ourselves accountable in the workplace?